Small Business Act that you can point us to that would indicate that there is a justification for having a two-tier loan system?
The two-tier loan system, again, is by statute, in that we are to identify, excuse me, I can say, okay, thank you, Section 7C5D.
Is that a requirement in the statute, or is that an interpretation by the agency of the statutory requirement?
It's a directive.
But does that mean that it is included in the language of the statute you just cited?
I wouldn't be able to accurately state that, sir, but I'll,
Well, let me move on then. After Hurricane Katrina, just 2% of all SBA loans were at higher interest rates and shorter repayment terms. Your agency's spokesman recently stated that over 95% of the loans made in Iowa after this disaster occurred carried higher interest rates. Do you expect that the proportion of these higher interest loans will continue to occur at such high rates?
I am very supportive of your concern, Congressman Braley, and I would like to take this opportunity to correct those statistics. The number that was quoted was a misrepresentation from a field rep, and it's actually representing 5% of the revenues, or I should say, yes, the loan value is reflective of a 10% business loan volume. So it's the reverse. It's not 95% of them at the higher rate. It's actually 10% of the businesses are at the higher rate, with reflecting 5% of the loan amounts.
Do you have any understanding as to why the spokesman made the claim that 455 loans totaling $67.6 million in post-flood loans in Iowa were made at the market rate, while only 3.3 million were made in long-term loans at the 4% rate?
I'm sorry, could you pose that question again, Congressman Braley?
Yes, the quote that I was referring to by the agency spokesman claimed that the SBA had made 455 loans totaling $67.6 million at the market rate, but had also made $3.3 million in long-term loans at 4%.
Any misrepresentation of the information that was given was corrected with the newspaper, so I can't specifically state about the numbers that you're giving me, but I can attest to the correction on the 95% figure.
Well, I think that the biggest concern that people have is that when people whose lives have been devastated by epic flooding, the likes of which our state has never seen before, are in need of loans at a time of crisis. They are in need of loans that meet their needs at that time, which would be the lowest possible interest rate to ensure their long-term viability. Is it your statement here today that in fact that is the reality of the loans that have been processed in Iowa?
Congressman Braley, I can assure you that the numbers that I referred to in my testimony are the number of loans that have been approved. The amount that has been approved is over $230 million. The fact that they have not been dispersed is twofold. The money is available, the loans have been approved, and now it's up to the recipient, the borrower, to access those funds. And typically, when funds are not dispersed, it's because either the borrower is still waiting on permits or contractors. So we've taken the position that we don't want the victim to have to wait on our turnaround time, because as I noted in the testimony, once the disaster victim applies, within the same week, we will call up the applicant to verify whether they received the application. Once the application is approved, we have case managers that will follow up and inquire the status of their concern, or whether we have to provide counseling or some advice, but we do follow up on those individuals that have been approved for funds and why they are taking a certain length of time to draw the funds. But the money has been approved, and again, it's $230 million. It's not that we have not appropriated the funds. They are available.
And I want to follow up on that because the SBA boasts that 7,000 loans were approved, and yet my understanding is that 46% of those loans are currently in a queue for closing. Is it your testimony today that all of those loans have not been closed because of some problem on the part of the homeowner or small business owner, as opposed to a delay in releasing funds for an approved applicant?
The funds are not, and I'd like to answer your question in this manner. The funds are not dispersed in totality. They will be dispersed as needed. So if the applicant is holding back from drawing those funds, it could be that, one, they do not want to incur any of the interest rates that would be incurred. Secondly, by allocating those funds prematurely, they would be charged the interest rate, and if they, again, don't meet the schedule for the permits, contractors, as you know, it's always on a priority basis. Construction is at a great demand, and so if they're on the rebuild mode, their ownership really is on the borrower. Now, can I tell you that all of those individuals are facing that predicament? I couldn't tell you what percentage are facing that, but I look forward to going back and checking those that are in the queue, that are waiting to be dispersed. What are the reasons for that?
Small businesses in Iowa are still struggling to recover after sustaining nearly $5.35 billion in damages. And many small business owners that I talk to claim that their money is being held up by red tape and that these disaster loans aren't a practical option. The one remaining hope for many small firms is some of the $2.65 billion already set aside for relief, and potentially more to come, is used for small business contracts. Will the SBA commit to meeting with FEMA, the Army Corps, and other major agencies receiving this funding and outline a plan for incorporating small and local firms?
Congressman Braley, I am very encouraged by the collaboration not only with FEMA, but the Corps of Engineers, state and local officials, because our focus in our reform agenda is expediency, is collaboration, and it's immediate policy implementation. And all three have been deployed very, very effectively. We not only have communicated to the Corps of Engineers via letter, but also the main agencies, whether it's DOD, GSA, to engage them very proactively in considering small businesses to pursue some of the work that's available.
Well, the reason why that's so significant to me, and we've had this conversation before on overall federal procurement and the role that small businesses could and should play in receiving those federal contracting dollars, is our information indicates that small businesses in Iowa have received just over $1 million in contract dollars in flood recovery contracts, which averages out to about $17,000 per contract. Meanwhile, firms in Maryland, Virginia, and even Georgia are receiving million-dollar awards. What is SBA doing to make sure that the directive that we've talked about over and over in this committee becomes reality, especially in a disaster situation where small businesses in my district are hungry to get back on their feet and could be performing much of the duties that are currently being outsourced to firms in Maryland, Virginia, and Georgia?